Hello, everyone. Welcome to Morbid Symptoms Podcast. I'm your host, Tara Van Dyke. The bulk of the episode is going to be focusing on the rift between what I'm calling PERFs and tags, so Palestinian-Excluding Radical Feminists, Ziofems, or Fash Fems, or Genocidal Fems, or whatever term you're comfortable with. And I'm not sure if I coined this or not, but tags, so TERFs Against Genocide. And anybody who's been paying attention in the UK who runs around these circles knows that these two camps, these two factions, come to a head and clashed several times over the FiLiA Conference. Apparently, the tags and the PERFs, it leapt off the Twitter and the social media, and it came face to face at FiLiA. So before we get into what happened and what we think it means, I'm going to poke at the Ziofems because I think they're disgusting. And other aspects of their life, perhaps they're fantastic. When it comes to this, gag me. It's gross. But that's a different thing. Laura, welcome. I had heard of the FiLiA Conference before, but I'm not really clued in on it. If you could just tell us basically the FiLiA Conference, this organization, how important is it in UK gender critical ultra feminine?
Well, very. It's massive. And I think one of the things that makes it so central and one of the reasons it was attacked by agitators this time round is because it has been, and I couldn't tell you who exactly they all are, who's on the board or who's most influential within the organization, but they have made every effort. They've really been bending over backwards to try to be as broad as possible and to be as inclusive as possible of both Ziofems and, tags. Good feminist, if you will. So they've been going, I couldn't say exactly, I want to say 7 or 8 years, kind of grew out of this movement of sorts that happened as a result of the fight back against gender identity ideology. They did a whole lot of fundraising. They started putting on these events, which exploded. But they don't just want to talk about the gender stuff all the time. They want to talk about what else is going on in terms of women's rights activism and people all over the world that are trying to make women's lives better in various ways. And they get a lot of these women and organizations together, and they have this event that, you can see people from, I can't remember how many different countries that are working in various different projects around women's access to land, access to education, how a lot of sexual exploitation stuff, domestic violence, all the rest of it. And you can hear from all these really inspiring women that are doing work on the ground where they're from to try to better people's lives. But also they give a little funds every time they've been in a city and they've had a conference there. There's a little fund set up to continue meetings in that city. And so Glasgow has a regular sort of FiLiA meetup once a month where women discuss different things. And if you are involved in a campaign, you can bring it along there and you can talk about it like I have done a few times. And if women are interested, they can get involved. So it's actually hugely helpful. Yeah, I think this time it was definitely targeted because it's been trying to be so broad. And, that's the question, isn't it? Can the center hold? Can you do that anymore? Can you try to be a friend to everyone?
Yeah. I just want to flag one thing. You mentioned the hot work intersectionality, and I think that's another thing to really be critical of going forward in this series. Some things really just can't go together. Hey, let's have KKK people and anti-KK or the Islam is terrible. People, Islam is invading us. Halal meat, cousin marriage, all they do is rape. And Israel has a right to defend itself. People sounding like they came out of BB's bottom. We can have that. And then we can have the people who were like, no, Zionism is imperialism. Zionism has got to go. It's a genocide. Let's talk about the last 80 years. Sorry, Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Let's not be hypocritical with the measure. Yeah. And I mean, there's certain things you would hope that people can be adults. There's certain issues that you can be like, whatever, but there's certain ones, especially since this is going on right now. And if you have a group of women who are denying a genocide and a group of women who are like, how can we be denying this genocide? And to think that that's going to be a Coke or Pepsi or a Labor Tory type of issue. And that's not FiLiA's fault. There's going to be certain points in time when the shit kicks off. And sisterhood ain't going to keep it together.
Yeah, well, one of the problems is that we're living in the UK, and if you've got a campaign, say, and you're trying get the ear of somebody who's actually in a position of power, because they do have politicians that come to these things as well. And the class thing obviously comes into this, or the amount of power, the amount of social capital that people have. A lot of women go to these conferences in the same way that people go to any conference in the hope of making connections with people that might be able to further their campaign or their project. And when you're in the UK, unfortunately, the elites, the powerful people, the politicians are vastly skewed pro-imperialist. So if you want to get in touch with them, get additional funding for your rape shelter, whatever it happens to be, you are going to have to lobby people that maybe you don't agree with. I do think sometimes there are ways of doing it. So for example, in the organization that I'm in, Tenants Organization, we are non-party political. So if you're a member of Reform, or I mean, I guess in theory, even if you were a member of something like the National Front or the BNP or something like that, you could still join. But the second you started coming to meetings and trying to organize and say, we need to get rid of all the foreigners or whatever, someone would speak up and say, no, you can't do that here. We represent all tenants. We represent everybody. So we would have to have a way of dealing with that doesn't mean we're excluding whole groups of people and telling people, no, you can't come to us for help with an issue with your landlord because we don't like your views on X, Y, and Z.
Wouldn't that be fantastic? Or right, he'd be like, so we can help you remigrate. Oh, here's your DNA test. Let's find out where your grandpappy came from, your great great grandmother, and then we'll help you. We'll help you get on a boat and go over there. That's the one side of your
practically in the real world, that kind of politics does not work. And I think that's something that FiLiA understood. Unfortunately, there are some women who are determined to push these contradictions to the fore. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It's hard to say. I guess we'll find out in the coming months.
Laura, I wanted to ask you, are you using a ring light?
I'm very bright, aren't I?
You are. You're going to want to tone that down, honey. And I'm just going to tell you what I wish someone had told me when I first got one. And I was looking over the video later, and I was like, my God, I look like a vampira or Elvira. Like I burst into flames if a stream of light gets faint. But anyway, back to serious things here. Okay. So FiLiA, it's a feminist organization, and it's about FiLiA, which is friendship and all of that. And they would platform women who didn't pretend that men could be women. When there was like the total kibosh on saying that out loud. So let's get into the TERF, the PERF tag. When I say PERF, I mean Palestinian-Excluding Radical Feminists, and then tags, which are TERFs Against Genocide. Already you had this divide between the feminists who were either like totally gender-borged or who, for whatever reason, were not going to speak out about the gender stuff, and the feminists who were. So the gender criticals, and of course the TERFs and the ultras and all that. And then October 7th happened, and immediately within the TERF camp, there was a divide. And so you kind of had, the non-genocidal tags. So you had that division. You had a lot of feminists and a lot of people who we considered to be intelligent, high information, rational people, just retweeting and parroting anything that came out of Tel Aviv and Washington, D.C. or number 10 Downing Street. And I thought, well, let's let things calm down, because the way the news is being astroturfed with the rape stuff and the beheaded babies and everything going on. And those of us who knew enough to be very skeptical of what we were being presented and how quickly it came out, I was like, this seems like Mossad had this in a drawer. Break when we have an opportunity to capitalize on something that Hamas does and flood the field with it. And I thought, well, let's just wait and see. Things will calm down a bit. But they never did. And you even had Kelly J. Keene, I think it was maybe a week after or something. She did a Thrift Talk Tuesday and basically gave out like a blacklist, basically like listing people who are pro-Hamas, pro-whatever. And it went on from there. And so what I'm trying to say is that people were already dealing with how most of the society was acting like they didn't know what a woman and a man was anymore. And on top of that, a lot of feminists, a lot of Marxist materialists also pretending that sex is a spectrum, whatever. And then to build this kind of community of sistership or camaraderie, And then to have this happen and have that split, I think it's been very traumatic. But I'll ask how it's been for you trying to process people who you respected sounding like Ava Braun and Goebbels and Ben Gvir 24/7.
I mean, I always remember this. My friend at school that was half Italian, and they had this thing, I don't know if they still have it, where foreign Italian expats can vote in Italian elections and they could do it online. I'd asked her who she was voting for, and she said, "Oh, I gave my vote to my dad because I couldn't be bothered." I asked who he voted for, so she went home and asked him, and then came back and told me he'd voted for Fini, which is the fascist. But he was the nicest man you could ever meet. Like, he was so lovely, he was so kind. And I think that was maybe my first experience of being like, huh, people can be different things at different times. Do you know what I mean? Like, so yeah, you can have truly abhorrent views about one issue, to me, but actually be really strong and really good on another issue. And I can deal with that on a one-to-one basis. When you're trying to work with someone, I can compartmentalize things in that. I think everybody that is involved in politics kind of has to do that. But what's hard is when the sort of networks of power come down on you. And we've been in this movement. So like there was a bunch of women got together to fight a thing, and they were connected and they all followed each other on Twitter and they all started writing for each other and all the rest of it. And then now suddenly those networks are being weaponized against women like me. And I think that's very familiar to those of us that got cancelled, like in recent years by the TRA mob. And it really bothers me when women, like, I mean, you see the lionization of AJ over the last few weeks, and all these images of like, here she is putting her body between evil man and the women and targeting and stuff. Like,
I should say this at the beginning. I'm responsible for what I say. Laura is not responsible for anything that I say. Okay. And I have not told her beforehand what I'm going to say. But the Aja thing, I mean, it's really difficult to give the whole center and right to tell them exactly what they want to hear. She's brave. She's bold. And I think a lot of these older lesbians have the hots for her. I really do. I think that DJ Lippy should not be advertising her lady. And if Aja's smart, which I think she is in this way in particular, she could be kept in the style of her liking by these middle to upper class wealthy lesbians. I think they all have the hots for her. I mean, which is fine. Get your groove on. But I know what you mean. With the men, we call it a circle jerk. With the ladies, I don't know, like a circle clit flick or something. And I'm sorry to be vulgar, but we are animals. And when you see the stuff on National Geographic with the chimpanzees and the apes, if someone gets really agitated, a group of them will go around and start just kind of grooming them and other things to calm them down. And it seems like they've circled the ranks around anybody who had to see a Palestinian flag at the FiLiA Conference. Or, oh my God, there was a lady who was selling hijab and triggers. Or there was a pamphlet and it said that Zionism is imperialism. And oh my God. And they're all going around just celebrating each other, just, petting and preening. And at a certain point, you're like, get a room. Can you do that in private? Why do we have to witness? Which I blame the algorithm. But yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And I think that Touched by an Angel, what's her name? J.K. Rowling, because of the influence that she has, I mean, anybody that's been touched by her who has a tweet retweeted or a lunch, it's like you just kind of been anointed by the great one. Where J.K. Rowling leadeth, the turban will follow. And that's part of its human nature. It's not a sex or gender thing. But I think that a lot of that is that she has yet to say one thing critical, not one word about what's going on in Palestine. Not one word. And when she does talk about it, it's to be like, oh, can we give it a break? Like, can you guys give it a break? Do you have to be protesting all the time? I'm like, you know what, J.K. Rowling? Fuck you. On that issue, a big fuck you. It's so disgusting. But she is like, oh, Afghan women, it breaks my heart. And the burqa. Why don't you stuff the burqa up your bonus hole? There is a genocide going on. Okay? And also, you want to know who's been mucking around in a lot of the countries and how that's not been good at all for women's liberation, your fucking country. You're a ruling elite, you know? So please spare me. And I don't know if they're stupid or they don't need to know or whatever. You know, you can't know what you don't know. But a lot of these women, they know, they're choosing not to know. And then to try to do that, and then at the same time have your cake and eat it too, want to be like glorious and righteous and, well, you know, it's so sad that Jewish women can't feel comfortable going to a feminist conference in Brighton. I'm like, really? Really? I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was just, you know, like crystal knocked there, but I have my doubts. Sorry for the rant, Laura. Spicy today.
Well, no, where I was going with that, actually, rather than having a go at them for playing the victim, was I was going to play the victim myself. But basically, they're going on, and this is before we even get to the actual, like, horrendous, like, violence, like, real violence, like what Palestinian women experience. I meant that, like, the kind of violence that we've all watched on our screens in the last, like, 10 years, like Kelly J. Keane going to that thing in Australia when she was kind of surrounded by this baying mob thrown at her and all the rest of it. Yeah, that is really scary. And that watching that was like a real like shock for me. But at the end of the day, any of us that have been involved in any kind of confrontation with the powers that be, with police, with counter protests or protests, you find yourself sometimes in what can be really aggressive, really intimidating situations. So back in the day when I was a student, we used to like chase the fascists around towns in the north of England. And they were basically football hooligans.
Laura, please not cut that. Laura, in case Antifa becomes a terrorist organization in the UK, you may not want to say that in your youth you were chasing fascists around.
But I mean, we never got to go anywhere anyway, because they'd always cattle you in a side street and just leave you there for hours, and then you get the bus home, and that was basically it. You get stuff thrown at you, you get scary men threatening you, you get pushed around. It's really unpleasant. And that's what I'm saying is like when these people are making a saint out of AJ and others saying like, look what they did for you women, you know, they put their bodies between you and the evil TRAs or whatever. Like, I appreciate that, but also the adrenaline rush fueled confrontation that you might have with scary men on a protest, that at the end of the day, you do tend to put yourself in that situation because you believe in something, pales in comparison to the social torture of being cancelled by friends and family members that you have known for years, who suddenly turn around and call you a fascist because you don't believe that men can change sex.
We know for a fact that there's a concerted effort to crank up Islamophobia to the highest possible notches and label as much stuff anti-Semitic as possible. And I'm not saying that Kelly J. and all these people are getting money. What I'm saying is that those that have big accounts, if they're not, it's on them. Because there's a shitload of money to be had to pump out this Hasbro bullshit. You know? And that's not even speculative anymore. It's a fact. And, you know, it's also easier maybe to be asked to leave a disco when you're getting a nice cut at the back end, because the more controversy, the better for them. And of course, I'm going to be biased on the pro-Palestinian side, the people who aren't pretending that a genocide isn't happening and who aren't just playing the la 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 hostage, la 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 Hamas, la la la. No matter how many bodies of babies and women and elderly and sick and the men that pile up, and no matter how it's obvious that a lot of Israelis get off on it. I mean, you know, some of the most popular Telegram channels in Hebrew are of killed Palestinian kids. And you can ask yourself, why would Israelis like seeing piles of dead Palestinian kids? Could it be because they're very concerned about demographic numbers? If you go by first what they say, then what they do, and then what they like just proudly celebrate, while the people on our neck of the woods are telling us that we're not seeing what we're seeing, that they're not saying what they're saying, that they're not doing what they're doing. And if you talk about it, you hate Jewish people, you hate Jewish women, you're an anti-Semite, you're a fascist, you're a terrorist, you're A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. And did you think maybe after like 4 or 5 months after October 7th happened, would you think that fast forward to this point with everything that Israel and its UK and EU and US backer in particular, the most important, the big kahuna, everything they have said and done, that you have Lear Keith make this banner? Yeah. That after all that, Wolf, Women's Liberation Front, and Women's Declaration National, Lear Keith, who has denied that there's a genocide going on in Gaza, by the way, recently, she sits down in her, I don't know, fascist cabin in the woods. No, Heidegger's, maybe that's what she's reading, and makes a sign. I altered this, and that's why it says parody on the bottom. Makes a sign that Kara Dansky takes with her from DC, and one of the first things they do outside the FiLiA venue is unveil Rape is Not Resistance with Israeli flags. 2 years after what's been going on in Gaza has been going on. Please make sense of this for me, Laura. How is this feminism? And if this is feminism, how should feminism not be cooked? To use the parlance of our times.
Well, I think the $7,000 price tag there is the important part, because, I mean, that's how this stuff perpetuates itself. The amount of money that is pumped into the Israeli state, and this is what they spend it on. It's all propaganda. And like, the comparisons with the gender stuff are insane, because for 2 years, a lot of women who are horrified by the piles of dead children have been keeping their mouths shut for the sake of campaigning or trying to get along or trying to be part of a community of feminists, you know.
And I'm assuming that it's harder to brush off being called an anti-Semite than it is to brush off being called a transphobe. You know, now I don't care.
Being called a rape apologist. As a woman being called a rape apologist. And I've seen that before, usually from men in different circumstances. But rape is, you can weaponize it against women and as a manipulation tactic very effectively.
I just wanted to flag that another theme of feminism's morbid symptoms is how TRAs and ZRAs, Zionist rights activist feminists, are, two sides of the same coin. So like the pro-trans woke bro stuff, it gave them carte blanche to go after women, call them transphobes, all the crap, you're just jealous or this or that or whatever. And then they did the same exact thing online. Some of these guys as low-T male allies or pets will come on, you're a misogynist, and you're a feminist for rape, and blah, blah, blah. And these cows don't say a fucking thing because they're lighting the fire. They're leading the charge. Julia Long, fuck you. And Tardansky, you as well, and these other two ladies. And they're not stupid. I've seen people try to have exchanges with them about, you realize that it has been debunked, not just once, not just twice, but thrice. Yeah. And they keep on pushing it, even though there is no collaborating evidence. None. All they have is people who said they saw something or heard something. So it's all secondhand, third-hand, fourth-hand hearsay. Israel will show all kinds of propaganda, but they won't let anybody see any evidence. It's the same thing with the babies. 40 beheaded babies raped. Even if you believe that, okay, we have the official death record from October 7th has one dead baby on it. One, not 40. It has one. Now that's terrible, but we also don't know who killed that baby, because the IDF killed a lot of people that day, probably killed the majority of the Israelis that day. Yeah. And is it terrible when a baby dies? Yes, it is. But it shouldn't matter what nationality or religion the baby is. But people have tried to tell them, people who know them from being in the trenches with this TRA stuff, they don't want to hear it. So Women's Declaration National, same thing with Wolf, except for if it's to talk about anti-Semitism, Hamas, and how, believe Jewish women and all this stuff, or Israeli women. Again, If you're going to be propagandists, fine. But they want to be both. They want to be like, oh, we're truth tellers and we're just, we just say the hard things and all this. And totally blinders. They will not entertain the fact that they got this so wrong. Not only that, they keep on doubling down with this sign. How many people were photographed with this sign? It's like almost like a rape trophy. It's like a trophy, like you would see, like a Nazi would be like, oh, here's his gold teeth that I collected from my time at the Auschwitz camp. It's sick. It's sick. And to say that this is no different than someone having a Palestinian flag, that somehow when they see a Palestinian flag, they think a Palestinian flag is saying that rape is resistance. Sorry, ladies. Bullshit. Bullshit. Off my soapbox. But I just want to be like, it was crazy. So here's Aja, Laura, can I ask you something? Did you ever think that rape was resistance? It was okay to rape? Is there ever a situation where you'd be like, you know what? You kind of had to rape there.
Here's spot right. How is this different from the whole like, oh, trans women are at risk in male prisons or being attacked in bathrooms? Like, you can tell what side the power is on, which side has the money and the institutions, and the government support behind it, from what they're allowed to get away with versus what we are allowed to get away with. Because they can push this stuff, they can lie, they can call women like the most incredibly like offensive names, they can be violent, they can demand naming and shaming, like Jean Hatchet was on Twitter. She's going, oh, you need to name these women that were dancing in this disco in dresses. Drug gun power, really. I mean, and this is what we saw over the last 10 years. Every woman, and they got bolder and bolder, but at the start it was, please let me just absolutely make clear, I don't hate trans people and I absolutely accept people's rights to wear makeup and to dress how they want and to sleep with who they want. As if that had anything to do with anything. It never did. It was about single-sex spaces. It was about prisons, rape shelters, homeless shelters, same-sex intimate care. This is nuts. You can't do this. But we were the ones constantly on the back foot, constantly having to apologize. No, I don't want to beat up trans people. Like middle-aged women maraud through the streets beating up trans-identified men. It doesn't happen. It's not a real thing.
You don't do that, Laura. I take my children out and I say, let's find the tranny. Like, we're like Kelly J. Keane after a hijab. That's what we're like. Yeah, you see that? That's a guy. Let's try to get his wig and go and shout man at him. Pretend you're Kelly J. Keane and that lady has a niqab on. And then we'll run around through your face. It's the second.
We got like 50,000 murdered women and children. And yet it's our job to be constantly, oh, I condemn Hamas. Oh, I'm not a supporter of Hamas. And, oh, I don't think rape is a good thing. Of course, no one thinks rape's a good thing. Literally, nobody has said that in years. Nobody has said that.
I hate to tell you this, sisters, but 99% of men don't think rape's a good thing either. We don't know how many people commit it, but as a norm, like, when is it okay to rape? You'd be hard pressed to find somebody. No, which doesn't say it doesn't happen, but come on, give me a break. Yeah, it's a total power trip. If you can lie this brazenly and not just lie, but act like you have the higher ground, the psychoanalysis of this is just going to be lit, people. But yeah, this is a power trip. They're getting off on it. And the thing is that I've never condemned Hamas. I also don't condemn Catholics. I'm not going to condemn whatever it was in Ireland. What was it? The IRA. But I'll fully condemn the IDF. I'll fully condemn Western imperialism and the military-industrial complex that goes around and creates fantastic groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda to wreak havoc in places that dare to think that they're going to have any kind of agency or sovereignty. But that's for a different time. But even if everything they think happened on October 7th happened, it didn't. Even if it did, it would not make what Israel is doing all right. Unless they want to come and say, well, those ladies were asking for it. Those babies are asking for it. Those elders are asking for it. Violence, male violence, oh, bad. Unless it's directed at people we don't like. And we love that shit. Can't get enough of it. Celebrate it. And they do. It's not like, oh, okay, we're going to do anything we can to kill military-aged men, which is bad enough. but we'll kill everybody. We'll shoot Hijab's car 350 times. And then when the paramedics come to get her, we'll kill them too. And then we'll say, oops, we thought they were Hamas, this family of 6 kids. And then women like them, they were complaining about it. That film about Hijab, how, oh my God, it got a 30-minute standing ovation and centering Jewish feelings. I don't give a flying fuck about Jewish feelings. I don't care. It's like, if you feel bad that Israel, that's constantly saying they're for every Jew in the world, that they're the land of the Jews, even though not of Israelis, but of Jews, and 90% of synagogues sign on to Zionism, and you send your kids to Hebrew school, sorry, you should be thankful that we're not asking you to do what every other group is asked to do if you're not white and someone from your group does something bad. You know? But how much the Jewish people don't feel comfortable when they have to go and someone has a Palestinian flag. Whoop! Harder. I really don't care. It's like, I'm an American, yeah? You're a UK lady. Our countries, our countrymen and women, whatever, have done some serious shit. Can you imagine? If I would be like, that hurts my feelings when you talk about Hiroshima. It hurts my feelings, Laos, when you talk about how my country carpet bombed you. It hurts my feelings, Vietnam, when you talk about how you're still dealing with the chemical warfare and, all the raping that went on with the soldiers. I mean, that hurts my American feelings. You should think about that. How is it any different? I don't get it.
These women are largely not Jewish. I mean, for the most part, the ones that are kicking up a fuss and saying Jewish women don't feel safe, etc., they're not Jewish. They're just pro-imperialists. They're anti-Muslim, but they'll basically back up. I mean, you see AJ there with her British flag in the bio. But these are the people they're sucking up to. These are the lovely, mostly male friends that they're now making, that they're watching flood their threads and use expletives and horrible language against the feminist women that were previously their allies. And now there's all these men, saying horrible stuff to them. And none of them has a word to say about it. We really know feminist women.
Well, maybe. I mean, that could be denial. Some of them are, for sure. Yeah. If they say they're feminists, I'm just going to assume they are. There is no blood test, right? Some of them, I can prove it.
100 years ago, it would have been someone else. So I had DJ Lippy this week tell me that Irish people don't exist. What form of resistance is permitted according to these people? No form of resistance is permitted. If it were up to them, there would never have been any resistance to the British Empire, to colonialism. The British Empire would still be a thing. Irish people wouldn't have their own country because any form of violent resistance is to be condemned. Of course, we're not pro-imperialist. Of course, we don't agree with invading places and killing people and oppression. We would never do that. But the point is, once it's been done, you're not allowed to fight back and you're not allowed to have a war of independence because that's terrorism and that's bad. And I've heard that since moving to the UK. We thought, oh, well, Ireland shouldn't have a country because they only achieved it through being terrorists. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, you people still exist. And they're being emboldened and they're being funded like Tommy, or whatever his name is, by the Israeli state. And these are his pals. These are his new friends. So I can't prove that they're getting any of that money, but come on. Did any of these women work?
Another one of the themes that I want to broach on the feminism series is why only the focus on penis violence? So if it's violence that is actually using a penis, or is one man doing something to a woman, then the feminists care a lot about that. But all the other kind of violence that far and away is more pervasive and ruins more lives, these ladies could give a shit about. Not only that, a lot of them, they engage in defense manufacturing, or they're actually administrators of the death machine. If anybody's under the idea that somehow women are less inclined to be all the bad things that we would think men are, you're fooling yourselves. When it's administrative, or when it's sending the people, when it's dropping the bombs, when it's addressing the sanctions. Remember Madeleine Albright when she was asked, Well, there's estimates that maybe even 500,000 children were killed because of the sanctions. Was that worth it to get Saddam Hussein out of power? That lovely feminist woman said without flinching, yes. So I don't buy it for a second that women are any better than men. And I think in some aspects, it can be more vicious. So this idea that violence and aggression and even femicide, infanticide is a primarily male invention and endeavor, that is not true. It's not true. So we need to address that at some point. But these women's reaction to this, I know it's bothered Heather Brunskin-Evans quite a bit. She's taken out the feminist from her bio. Like, I don't even know what's going on here. And I'm like, I don't think this is a new thing. So we're going to go through some of the incidents, apparently, that happened that were so triggering, and the response from FiLiA and also a couple of the other women's organizations that were there. And I know some of the women, they came from the States, and they just had what they thought was fairly innocuous leaflet about Palestine. And someone found it and freaked out and was not just hounding them there, but they had to shut down their email for a while because they were just getting inundated with all this nastiness. And they were like, what the frick? We thought we're going there and hanging out with our sisters and we're getting all this hate and, we're like traumatized. Which is not a good thing. But Sarah Phillimore, she was at FiLiA and she was upset. She said, why did I have to ask twice? Do you understand why selling headscarves at a feminist conference is triggering to many? So she was upset about the headscarves and that she had to ask twice about why this was being allowed, because there was some woman there that was selling hijabs. And one of our favorite queen tags, Dr. Brunskin-Evans, who's also written a lot about debunking or consolidating the rape hoax and why it's really bad that a lot of feminists keep on keeping on as if it hasn't been debunked. So she wrote to Sarah, selling headscarves might be triggering for some, but having no voice as a Palestinian woman to talk about patriarchal occupation and Israel's killing and maiming of women and children and men by the thousands, without the conversation descending, as always, into a discussion of headscarves is also triggering for others. If we want space to discuss power, patriarchy, and social control, perhaps we should be grown up and try to get a grip, or choose a conference where everything you believe is believed by everybody else. I mean, can you imagine something that upsets you? But maybe that's on you. I cannot imagine being so upset by a headscarf. They weren't asking me to wear it. They weren't saying it's anti-Tory. And she's really upset about that to pieces.
Well, I mean, it's performative. It's clearly performative. I mean, I get upset by things all the time. I have very strong opinions about stuff. I don't go around making it everybody's problem. How entitled do you need to be to think that, sorry, why did I have to ask twice? These people just put on a conference. Do you know how busy they will be? Do you know how much stuff they have to mop up and take care of, and how many emails they have to answer and all the rest of it, logistics wise? Their job is not done. But you're so important. You have so many followers on Twitter. It's vital that they should explain to you why a headscarf was present in the room at a time that you also were, and why this was allowed to happen, why your feelings were permitted to be upset. Oh God, it takes a special kind of woman to actually write in public to the organizers and demand an explanation for it. And I'm sorry, but it's a headscarf once you put it on your head, okay? So as far as I know, there was a woman there that was selling the one piece thing that goes over the top. So yeah, obviously that's a headscarf. That's what it's designed for. I don't think that was actually the Hebron women. I think that was a separate stall. And it sounds like she wasn't there for very long. So it wasn't actually connected to the Palestine thing. There just happened to be a woman that was selling it. But realize there's a lot of Jewish women wear headscarves too.
Yeah.
Are they allowed? Because they say that if they say they're just doing it for themselves, they're not being forced to do it by a man or whatever, this is a symbol of my faith or whatever, it's okay for them? You make your mind up what the rules are. When are you allowed to tell women what they shouldn't be wearing?
No, Islam is coming to get them. Sharia law is right around the corner. Certainly seem to desire that.
I was informed by the same woman who this week told me that Irish people didn't exist. I was told that the UK has been colonized by Muslims. But the UK would never have colonized other countries in the same way because they did it in a nice, benign way and never sought to erase other people's cultures. This is what she actually said. It's pretty a little bit of ignorance. People don't learn to the world.
Well, I think maybe in theory, if she thinks the race war would be fun, maybe whoever's going to be Aja's sugar mama will take them both and they won't be in the thick of it. But okay, if you don't like the demographic changes, you know, people have freedom of association. You're worried about the dilution of the culture, whatever that means to you. Okay. Do they think that the Muslims get together and decide, okay, this is what we're going to do? Do they think the Muslims control the UK's immigration policy? Are they idiots? And do you think that if reform gets in charge,
And yet people are being
about
arrested.
immigration, do you really think they're going to do that? They need that labor. Also for this cheap labor, but and not that everybody that comes is low skill or no skill, but a lot of the people are. And it suppresses wages and it gives them a scapegoat that you idiots allow them to offer you instead of meaningful policy every freaking election. If you don't like immigration, if you want less immigration, then why don't you go and talk to the people that make the decisions and conduct the foreign policy and the internal policy that push those people here? Or shut the fuck up with this stupid bullshit. These low information, useful idiots. You know, yeah, you think immigration's out of control. You don't like the multicultural. You want it to protect the culture. If you really care about it, then you should find out what the drivers are. Because as much as they like to think that these military-aged men is some sort of master plot to take over London, rather than the political economic policies from the last 60 years, it's just stupid. You know, but whatever. I know that you know that, but it's like if you really care about immigration, then look into the push and pull factors and the distribution. But that's no fun. And that doesn't get me the pats on the head as screaming about Islam, Sharia, as a marriage, wherever that came from, you know, halal food. All of a sudden, like everyone's freaked out about halal food. I was like, I had to figure out, am I missing something? Do they think that Islam spreads through the halal meat? I've had lots of shawarma and whatnot. I have yet to head over to the mosque.
Well, that explains it.
So this is from Bev Jackson. Bev Jackson is an idiot. I'm not saying she's an idiot at all things, but this, I almost spit out my coffee. So her tweet, an organization called @TWV Newsletter had a stand at FiLiA. It has been disseminating a pamphlet with some of the most violent anti-Jewish tropes I've ever seen. I don't know if she's British or not. So I thought, oh my God. I was like, what's going on at FiLiA? And so then I read this. Israel, loyal attack dog of U.S. imperialism in the Middle East. Well, that's a fact. Let's see. Although Zionists have real teeth, as do any other jackal of imperialist domination, they have become exposed and weak. As revolutionary leader Mao taught us, which can be found in the seminal quotations from Chairman Mao, when you cut open an occupying Zionist soldier, a fragile Nazi general bleeds. They haven't been and will never be successful in smothering the fire of Palestinian uprising. The Zionist stormtroopers cower in the face of Palestinians smashing their bondage of colonial oppression and slavery. There is a deep reservoir of hatred against Israeli occupation that's become seared into the political consciousness of oppressed humans around the globe. This is all true. Now, apparently Bev has never heard this before. So
Where are the anti-Jewish tropes?
Well, yeah, that's the point. There isn't any. Unless being critical of Zionism, being critical of colonialism, being critical of illegal occupation, being critical of apartheid, unless that is the anti-Jewish trope. But I think that clearly Bev is of the school that Israel and Jewish are the same thing. So she makes people like Bibi Netanyahu very happy because as Zionists, they need people to make that conflation. To think that critiquing Israel or Zionism is like you're a Nazi or something. And so in the content of Palestinian women fighters, they possess a fervor specific to their conditions. They know patriarchal suffering, the oppression of the female sex, intimately bound to the genocide of their people as an oppressed nation. This has propelled them towards political organization taking up arms and stabbing colonialism directly in the neck. The Zionists and their legion of imperialist goons believe they've destroyed everything in Palestine. And while it is true that they have left them without homes, schools, electricity, water, and without parents and siblings, Palestinian spirits. Bev is unhappy because apparently she's never been confronted with people who are critical of Zionism and the Israel project. It's at the center of it. Yeah, but there's no anti-Jewish troops there.
Well, I think she's just wrong and she doesn't know what she's talking about and she
Yeah.
hasn't looked into this. And again, she's the woman who knows what a lesbian is. She recognized what a lesbian was when a lot of people lost their minds and didn't know what they were and kudos to her for that. That does not in any way make her an expert in anti-Jewish tropes. Do you know what I mean? She would need to actually write something. And I know she pays for Twitter. She's got the little blue tick. So she has as much space as she wants in that tweet to go into what these tropes are. When did she become the go-to on anti-Semitism or anti-Jewish ideology or whatever? 20 more people in a position to talk about this. When did she start taking an interest in geopolitics at all? I guess this is it. They fund, I'm not saying she's directly funded, but she's part of a system in which a lot of people are funded. And that's where the discourse is generated from. And she's very much part of that, whether she's personally getting paid for it or not. When you run an organization, like, there are ways of getting paid without getting paid directly. Do you know what I mean? So you can know what side your bread is buttered on without necessarily receiving a paycheck directly.
The Zionists pay people a lot of money. Yeah? They bought Barry Weiss's Substack and podcast for $150 million and put her in charge of CBS News. They bought TikTok. They buy influencers. Zionism needs propaganda. They need people to react like Bev does when they hear something like this. It's propaganda that anything about that Israel equals Jewish people, critique of Israel equals anti-Semitism, equals the Holocaust, and the Hebrew school, and AIPAC, and why every single person in the U.S. Congress has a handler except for two. And there's other Zionist organizations. And a man named Ilan Pappé is an Israeli. He's very critical of the Israeli project in Zionism. He wrote a book about the Zionists and how if you want to understand the relationship between the UK and the EU and the United States and their imperialist outpost colony in West Asia, there's a lobby. And a big part of it is paying people off one way or another, or getting compromising material on them, or funding their organization with lots of money. You know, if you start doing that, then you get their side of the story, yeah? So I am convinced, I don't know this for a fact, but I would be very surprised if the reason why Women's Declaration International, that clearly has no geopolitical understanding of anything, all of a sudden, in the middle of a genocide that was causing all kinds of problems for Israel and its imperial backers throughout the West, decided all of a sudden to open up a chapter called Women's Declaration Afghanistan. And we go check that out. I mean, it's the most Orientalist, white woman's burden, feeding red meat to the femmes as you could possibly imagine. It's like that woman knows her audience, whoever's curating that stuff. But anything that makes Islam or Muslims look bad is good for Israel. Well, look, we can't deal with these people. It's their whole thing. We're the only democracy, we're Western values, all this stuff. Oh, yeah, there's illegal occupation. Oh, yeah, we rape prisoners to death. Oh, yeah, Palestinians don't have any rights. Oh, yeah, just openly read what we've been saying for 100 years about how we're people without a land for a land without a people, and how our goal has been from the beginning to have as much as Palestine as possible with as few Palestinians on as possible. But pretend you don't know that. Only bad people say that. This is whole operation. And you don't have to listen to me, you know, an anti-Semite. There are Jewish people, Jewish researchers, serious people, and also Israeli ones who have been trying to expose this for decades, you know, and I'm sure she's shocked by it, but well, you know, Israel not nice. Laura, Israel not nice. To people who aren't Israelis, they're not nice. Huh? Aja is acting very surprised. She doesn't know why she got on FiLiA's shit list. So what do you know about Discogate?
Only what I've heard from a couple of people that were there. I don't know where Aja, I don't know where she fits into it, to be honest. I don't know what she was up to.
Yeah. There's a woman, Millie something. Millie Hill, yeah, Millie Hill. Anyway, she was at this disco. She wrote in her Substack that a security person came over and informed her that Aja was there. And somehow, again, this was the equivalent of Sarah seeing a headscarf. She got freaked out. She had written something critical of Aja. And so then she was worried that Aja was going to come and have a confrontation with her. And she was upset that someone from FiLiA told her this and then just left her on her own to figure out what to do about a possible face-to-face. And so that's the only thing that I heard. FiLiA were concerned that she was there to cause trouble. At least that's the story that I got. Which could be untrue, but it wouldn't surprise me.
I know she ended up with like a tiny amount of spilled drink on her from the person that threw a pint, which I've been told was somebody throwing a pint at, Sathi, is that her name? The one that had been giving the speech.
Can you tell us about Discogate to fill in the blanks for people who don't know?
From the sounds of it, okay, so I wasn't there. It sounds like most of it was Jean Hatchet trying to stir up trouble. So she was very angry at the presence of Keffiyehs on the stage, which it seems happened in response to women with kippahs or yarmulkes dancing on stage, which I find really weird, right? Because traditionally those are worn by men. And I remember there was one woman walking around with the yarmulke on during FiLiA Glasgow. And I was like, is that not a guy thing? Is this a transsexual and a Jewish person? An Orthodox Jewish transsexual who come to FiLiA? Yeah. Like, this is really strange. Apparently, sometimes people wear them just, as a show of solidarity or whatever. I don't know how I feel about that. Like somebody appropriating a religious symbol. But the woman I remember that was in Glasgow, on the Saturday, there happened to be a ceasefire in Gaza rally going through the city centre at the same time that FiLiA was breaking for lunch. And this woman was out the front, and I remember her saying very loudly in proximity to some family that were part of the Palestine march, oh, look, there they are, those people that want to kill all the Jews. And I just remember kind of exchanging a very uncomfortable look with the security women, just being like, ooh, that's a bit, can you not? Obviously, they don't, that's not what they're there for. So I remember thinking she's a bit odd. So I wonder if maybe she was one of these women that were wearing kippahs. But anyway, so there was a bunch of women wearing kippahs apparently on the stage. And then in response to that, some women jumped up with their keffiyehs and started dancing. So that is the account.
I had heard at some point there was a film, I think this is the clips that Hatchet dropped. Someone started dancing with the Palestinian flag. And this caused a problem. And they were asked to leave, and it was like the manhandling. And then someone went out and shouted at them about their
male security. Well, I mean, the account that I got today was that Jean Hatchet was actually going up to women, trying to pull the scarves off their necks and giving them the finger and saying, fuck you, you Jew hater, you Nazi, etc. So, I mean, that's a little bit more than, oh, I saw some keffiyehs and I was upset by it. It's like, no, you started a physical altercation with these women. And then when you got a male security guard, not a FiLiA person, a person from the venue, because I don't think FiLiA would have allowed this, and he came down like a ton of bricks on this woman who with the keffiyehs and left bruises on her. He manhandled her, basically picked her up and lifted her off the stage. Now, again, she hadn't started this display, this conflicting solidarity display that had gone on. She's just dancing with a scarf, or maybe it was the flag, at the time. And a male security guard called by Jean Hatchet comes and manhandles her off the stage. So some women were understandably upset by that. And there is footage of that. There's also footage from somebody in the audience filming the women dancing on the stage, which I believe was uploaded after all this conflict. to
Mm.
show that the women weren't actually doing anything intimidating or aggressive, that they were just dancing with, I
Yeah.
thought, one
Yeah.
flag and one woman with a
Mhm.
keffiyeh on. And I think that they uploaded that to be
Mhm.
like, well, look, that this is all they were doing. But
Mhm.
Jane Hatchet then took that footage and sent it, to FiLiA and to all her followers saying, you have to name and shame these women. They must be banned from future events, blah, blah, blah. At which point, you were just doxing women at the Feminist Conference. That's all you're talking.
I remember I waited on something like, well, who cares? And why are you snitching on people? And then this woman was like, are you saying it's okay for blah, blah, blah? And finally I said, look, I don't give a flying fig about somebody's flag or their scarf or about your bitch fests and snitch fests. It's ridiculous. And also, sorry, ladies, you all are upset about the man until you freaking need one. It's such the hypocrisy, you know? And it's just like, it's just the most ridiculous thing. And we've all been places where someone, not everyone handles their alcohol that well, or maybe who knows, someone's mixing something. But the idea that it breaks out into this, and if they don't realize it, just how batshit crazy it makes them look, just so ridiculous. And they try to get on you. Are you saying it's okay for them to show basically like the Third Reich flag? I'm like, I didn't see any Jewish flag there because I was, trying to stir their pot. I'm like, I didn't see no Israeli flag, but yeah, it was crazy. But
Clarification.
okay,
Sorry, clarification from someone in the chat. It wasn't Safi that had the pint chucked at her. It was Lucy Masood, and it was Jean Hatchet that chucked the pint.
Jesus.
Unless there were two pints chucked, I'm pretty sure AJ is just.
I have to tell you, these ladies are
I
giving
don't know.
football
Again, I don't know why
their
she was
money.
banned.
I've never even thrown a drink at a man before. I mean, I've given a crossword to a guy that got it too fresh, but I've never thrown a drink, man or woman. Oh my God, the FiLiA Conference. So, poor FiLiA. I want to go through the official statements from FiLiA, from Full Women Victory, who was involved, this group from America that had quite a time. And then there's a group, the feminist group in London, and I think it's mainly BIPOC women. Anyway, I think that each of these organizations had people involved in these events. So what I want to do is we'll read the important parts of the three responses, official responses, give our interpretation, and then we'll say goodbye until next time. Does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we could go on about this if we could see.
Well, no, I just know that you're tired, and I didn't sleep very well last night, and then I
I'm
made
shut-
like a Monster Energy drink, so now I don't even know what I'm saying. I could be talking in tongues here. Okay. Let me get this little thing off. Please do like and subscribe, viewers. All right. Okay, so can you read this?
Yeah, I can read it. The FiLiA trustees have been reflecting since our conference finished 6 days ago, listening to the many women affected and looking after our team who have worked exceptionally hard over the last 2 years in preparation for our largest and 10th conference. It is clear there are multiple perspectives and experiences, and we want to start by acknowledging that the statement won't satisfy everyone, but we hope it reassures women that we have listened, will continue to listen, and are responding to the issues that occurred last weekend. Reporting to the Charity Commission. We want to make it clear that FiLiA completely distances itself from religious fundamentalism and extremism in all its forms, including Hamas and support for Hamas, and we condemn all violence against women in all its forms everywhere. We are firmly anti-racist and condemn all forms of racism, whether based on real or perceived race and or religion, harassment, prejudice, and discrimination. We acknowledge that we missed some very important elements of due diligence, and we take this extremely seriously. We have contacted the Charity Commission, and with their guidance, we'll be reviewing our processes, including our due diligence process, to ensure that all future speakers, stall holders, and materials are in line with FiLiA's mission, reflect FiLiA's values, and are within the law.
Okay, so my first thing was a whole lot of HR speak. And also, do women have to be coddled like this? I don't think it's a good thing. We've been reflecting and we've listened and this and that, but I guess they have to say it. Another thing is, I feel for them. I can imagine the amount of pressure that the PERF Ziofem side put on them. But I'm like, okay, FiLiA's probably been captured. And I didn't have to take the heat that they took. So, and it's not just a one woman show, but I mentioned Hamas and support for Hamas, but not Israel and support for Israel, or the IDF and support for the IDF. They are taking a side. This is the same reason why, from the first thing that anybody ever asks somebody, even before October 7th, what's the first question? Do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Islamic terror? Because you get that out there, and it sets the stage. There's this bad thing, there's this enemy. And so, yeah, maybe Israel does some bad things, the UK does some bad things, or America does some bad things, but there's Islamic terror. So this is some bullshit. This is manufacturing consent. They are using the narrative, that pro-imperialist Zionist narrative. They specifically mentioned Hamas and support for Hamas, but off the other side, which is taking a side. So the only thing that's acceptable in terms of Hamas is complete condemnation. What are the parameters for what we can feel about Israel in this, or Zionism in this? This is some bullshit. I can understand why they would write something like this, but still I was like, they got the call. Any thoughts, Laura?
It's really disappointing. Also,
Mm.
someone in the chat made the valid point that Hamas is not a religion. So it's like a bit badly written as well. I do wonder if all of the trustees had an equal hand in writing this. I'd imagine it's something that was bashed out in a bit of a panic by somebody. I think it just goes to show how much pressure one side or one group of people is able to put on them. And they have a lot of power and more money, and they're probably better connected, and they're probably able to do more damage. And so I think it reflects that more than it reflects what the membership, or the kind of women that go to FiLiA would feel about these things.
Well, I don't know their general knowledge. The information's out there. It's not hard to become literate about what's going on in the Middle East, but it does take some effort. If all you got from what you got from your basic education and what you get from the mainstream outlet and the BBC, this type of thing isn't surprising. But it's just that the violence that looks a certain way and is done by a certain group of people, somehow that's always better and doesn't require a specific name check. So I'm sorry, my computer is doing weird things. I don't know if it's me or my computer. Please go on stage. Is it going to go on stage? Okay. So this is the SBS Southall Black Sisters. This is their statement on the FiLiA Conference. And I'm not going to read all of it because it's like 3 pages, but I'll just give you a flavor. Okay. I'm always anti-Zionist and never an anti-Semite, and always an anti-racist feminist against misogynist wars. Zilla Eisenstein. So that's clever to start with the Jewish lady. Okay. At the time when a second year of Israel's genocidal assault on Gaza's ended, the FiLiA Conference in Brighton highlighted deep schisms within a feminist movement committed to end violence against women and girls. Southall Black Sisters has unequivocally condemned the actions of Hamas and the Israeli state. And when SBS's chair called on women at FiLiA Conference to stand against the genocide in Gaza, she was heckled and accused of anti-Semitism. Very few women, mainly minoritized women, stood with her in solidarity with Palestinian people. While she was being trolled on social media by women who were at the conference, FiLiA trustees asked our chair to make a public statement distancing FiLiA from her call for solidarity with Palestine. It was a shocking denial of responsibility and a refusal to confront those responsible for the harm on the part of FiLiA. SBS is a Black feminist, anti-racist organization with a long history of confronting violence, racism, and institutional betrayal. Only recently, our executive director was violently assaulted in a racist attack and then wrongly prosecuted, which should have made safeguarding our members an absolute priority at FiLiA. Instead, SBS members and other Black feminists were left exposed to hostility and intimidation throughout the conference and at the Saturday night party, and that must have been the disco. We had warned FiLiA in advance about the risks posed by the presence of women who had promised to dispute the conference, but the safeguarding measures proved inadequate. We came with victims, survivors of violence, migrant women, and refugees who live in trauma. They got all the matrix of oppression checks there, and who believed they were entering a feminist space committed to safety, dignity, and solidarity. Oh, sister. Instead, they witnessed harassment. I mean, I think it's great that people still think this way. Racist comments and open intimidation from other attendees. In this environment, the women felt empowered to attack SBS members on right-wing media platforms like GB News and Unheard as anti-Semites and Hamas apologists. Sure they did. Let's see, including Julia Long. Okay. Our grief and condemnation of Hamas atrocities against Israeli people, including sexual violence against our Jewish sisters on the 7th of October, was framed by knowledge of the complicity of the Israeli state in the creation of Hamas and the rapidly overtaken by disproportionate brutality of the Israeli government towards Palestinians. And I'm going to stop it here because this is where they hang themselves. Again, we can't prove a negative, but there's no evidence that Hamas went around raping people in Zionist occupied Palestine when they went in there. They had a plan. There was goals. If you think about it, first of all, you're probably thinking, oh my God, the adrenaline's going. And then first you get through the gate, you get over the fence, and then you're getting traction. And they want us to believe that all of a sudden these guys stopped and just decided just to rape anyone and everyone and then film it and then stop and share it and upload the films and, whatever. So first of all, they're peddling debunked atrocity porn propaganda that's sole purpose is to get people not to care or not to care that much, or to be like, oh, what are you going to do? War is hell. We also call it a war is propaganda. And again, Hamas, please, anyone listening, this is not supported the organization. They're very bad. But what I'm saying is that they're a political organization. They have militias. Initially, it was a religious cultural organization, but it's morphed. They have a right to armed defense of themselves and Palestinians. They went in and did a raid on Zionist occupied Palestine. And when they say kibbutz and the rave and all that stuff, isn't it fantastic? Those places, a lot of them are illegal and they're part and parcel of the occupation, apartheid, concentration camp apparatus. They are not innocent. If you are 18 or older in Israel, sorry, you're not an innocent civilian. You're just not. That doesn't mean I want terrible things to happen to you. I mean, I wouldn't care what happened to Bibi. Daniel Weiss, she's also crazy. But there's mandatory conscription. So women and men, I think for women, young women, it's 2 years, men, it's 3 to 4. And then after that, you go into the reserves. You know what your country is about. You know what the Zionist project is about. There are no innocent adult civilians, not one. There isn't one. They're all complicit to a varying degree. Doesn't mean that they should have their baby beheaded or raped, and no one beheaded their babies, and there was no mass rape. Yeah? But there's a shitload of shit that Israeli has done, not just in the 2 years. I mean, that's just like off the chain. But since the beginning. And I get why they can't say that because there's prescribed organizations. But I'm going to tell you, ladies, and anybody else, you're not doing yourself any favors by starting off with, we condemn Hamas, because it's never going to be enough. Once you do that, you're done. You've lost the argument. Doesn't mean you have to say every single thing they've ever done is great, or every single person that's a part of that organization is an angel, or anything like that. But it's also the measuring of two cups. Yeah? They don't have a state. They don't have an army. They don't have a navy. They don't have the Marines. They have no tanks. They have no planes. They have no Apache helicopters. They have no missiles. They have no air ground defense system. They have small explosives they can make themselves and old guns. That's what they have. And if anybody had to deal with a fraction of what the Palestinians have dealt with, you would be Hamas or a Hamas supporter or whatever. There's a reason why Hamas's popularity, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank and in the region more broadly, has skyrocketed because they are fighting this nasty imperialist project. And if you don't like the violence, go to the root of it. Sorry. But as soon as they said that, I was like, ladies, you're done. You're done. And I get why they would, because, to come out and not do that, That's why Piers Morgan forever was asking everybody, do you condemn Hamas? Do you condemn Abbas? Because as soon as you do that, you're playing their game, you're in their discourse. And then it becomes like, how much can Israel defend itself? A lot or a lot, a lot? Well, of course, Israel has to do this. This becomes if they're being excessive or not. And how much you blame the Palestinians because they voted for Hamas and conveniently forgetting that Palestinians voted wrong. That's when the blockade happened. That's when it got all kinds of draconian because they wanted to punish them. They wanted to punish them for voting for Hamas, and it has kicked them in the ass. And these people, Hamas, what they did that day, whatever you think about it, because a lot of people only like victims that don't fight back, was world historic what they did on October 7th. World historic. And what they continued to do, but people want to lie and be like, oh, the worst thing for the Palestinian people is Hamas. When explained to me after going through 2 years of genocide, well, their popularity is increased. It's increased. You want to think Palestinians are stupid? No, they're one of the most highly educated groups in the world, actually. So next. Anyway, anything you want to say about how Southall Black ladies approached this scandal?
I hadn't read that statement, which, obviously mentions Hamas about 5 times and doesn't go into any real detail about what women have been going through in Gaza for the last 2 years. But I thought generally they dealt with it pretty well, and it was quite brave of them to have that event and stuff. They brought it to the fore, and good on them for doing that. But I was listening to the replay of a space that was held by some tags earlier this week, and some guy came on and was saying that Palestinians have the right to resist. And he was pretty well shot down. And these are by people, they've been aware of this issue for years before, October 7th. And then they were just, oh, well, no, I don't agree with killing people. Just performance. So as women, as feminists, women, it's our job to be purist pacifists at all times. So we need to imagine ourselves to be completely separate from the communities that we live in, from all nationhood or, any kind of political or geopolitical struggle. Like, that's our job, is just to wave the white flag and say that no, killing is bad. Even when they're killing you, it's bad to kill them back.
I just want to say, just because you're not seeing someone being killed doesn't mean you don't live in a violent system. It doesn't mean that you don't likely benefit in some ways from violence that you don't see, because it gets laundered through the supply chain and exchange.
But all that you do basically by this constant we condemn is you're playing into their arguments, and you're saying, yes, there is something unspeakably evil about resistance. And again, it's the same kind of tactic or the same form of argument that we've seen of TRAs for the last, 10 or whatever years, is that, like, if you have women constantly apologizing and saying that they're not in favor of anti-trans violence, that they're not homophobic, that they don't have a problem with gender nonconformity, then you are playing into their hands. You're saying, yes, there is a problem with this, and it's easy to conflate the things that we're saying with that kind of, violent rhetoric or whatever. So just in the same way that the pharmaceutical companies require that kind of propaganda in order to keep mutilating children, the liberal politicians require that kind of propaganda to maintain their voter base. So women need to keep saying, oh, I'm sorry, I don't agree with violence against trans-identified people. It's the same. Feminists need to keep saying, we don't support resistance. We don't support resistance. And it just goes to show there's one side that is afraid. One side is afraid of getting a visit from the police, getting your account shut down, getting a visit from the police, getting fired from your job, losing your friends, etc. You losing your column or your academic position or whatever it happens to be. And one side is not. So all that tells you really where the power lies. And these people that are all like, oh, the poor little Jews are getting victimized, absolute nonsense. We have not been colonized by Muslims. We do not have Sharia law. What we have in this country is everywhere.
If only they'd be as curious about the city of London as they are about their local mosque, I think a step in the right direction. I understand that it's not easy to challenge rape narratives It's easy to be like, oh my God, that's terrible. I can't believe that they killed all those babies and raped all those women. But to be like, hold on a second. What? It's not easy to be called a rape apologist. But also, what I want to say is people who say they're anti Zionist. And again, I don't know if people know what that means. If you're anti Zionist, you don't think the state of Israel has the right to exist. You're basically saying, like, look, you Ashkenazi Jews, which basically who came from Eastern Europe and Russia and London and Hong Kong, not Hong Kong, we're probably some from Hong Kong, apparently, in Brooklyn. But anyway, they lobbied, the original Zionist lobbied the uppity ups in the British government and said, hey, we would like to set up shop in Palestine. And Balfour, the reason why they did it wasn't because he was worried or concerned about Jewish safety. And again, you can find this in the written record. They were like, well, this would be a good thing for the UK Empire to have a thankful Jewish colony in the Middle East. And you don't have to think very hard. Why would the UK want an imperial outpost colony beholden to them in that part of the world? Oh. And then the empire fell and then the US took over. And why would the US want Israel? There's a reason why I call it the imperial outpost colony. It's not because Israel and the ruling elite of the West are of one mind, but they have shared interests. Like, you get your crazy lunatic colony and we'll call everything you do the opposite of what it is. And you are our thug in that region. Basically, that's why they get all the weapons. You don't need all this military stuff, this high-tech military stuff, and all this tons and tons of weapons to fight a group of people that doesn't have a military. That is not what that's about. So, and of course, they're not always on the same side. There's intrigue. JFK was a bit cold feet. There's a reason why they go around having to spend so much money on Western politicians and why they want to get, the backup Epstein Island stuff, because they're aware that this project, especially the public appetite for it, can go up and down, which is why they're going crazy now when so many people aren't buying the bullshit anymore. When you have more and more people, not just us, lovely, not 20-year-old ladies, being willing to take the slings and arrows to call out the bullshit, but you have younger generations in the United States in particular, which Israel's very keen on, who are like, yeah, nah, and not just on the left. So this has Israel panicked, because as soon as the United States decides new number who dis, Israel is screwed, unless they decide to use the nuclear weapon and take everybody out with them. But hopefully that doesn't happen. But anywho, yeah. So one last thing. So this is a group called Total Women Victory. I hadn't heard them before. They're based in the United States, and they went to FiLiA for the first time. And they also had an altercation with people freaking out about their solidarity with Palestinian women. But they did something different when they talk about Palestine. They don't condemn Hamas. They don't talk about Hamas. I'll just read this one part. Our table showcased multiple zines we created, ranging from topics such as prostitution, honor-based cultures, and one widely shared online, patriarchal violence and Zionist genocide, the resistance of Palestinian women. The last sentence of this zine: we support Palestinian women and the entirety of the Palestine's resistance to Zionism, has caused considerable controversy. This statement refers to the strategic coordination among the various Palestinian resistance factions, and now condemnations of these factions from the West have been used to cultivate consent for the ongoing genocidal campaign in Palestine, especially Gaza. In Total Women Victory, we aim to disrupt co-optation attempts by first and foremost centering Palestinian women's analysis of their own liberation, grounded in their specific and political conditions, and secondly, by refocusing on the material conditions of women. So all I have to say, Total Women Victory, brava. They didn't play the game. And it shows that you can do that. If you're uncomfortable by that group because it's Islamic, because you don't like your freedom fighters to be religious or conservative, okay. But they held their ground. They were very professional. They laid out what happened. also talked about the good things that happened there and the fact that they're taking considerable effort not to put words in Palestinian women's mouths, but trying to literally actually amplify them. So I'm a fan now of Total Women Victory. And you get the last word, Laura.
Yeah, I'd never heard of them before, but I'm following them now, and I think they dealt with that very well. And yeah, maybe it's not a bad thing if these contradictions are brought to light. And if I know that I've found a lot of new people to follow and listen to and read stuff by over the last week or so. I've also unfollowed a lot of people that I previously thought, oh, well, maybe, you know, they might give me some support with this at some point. I mean, yeah, there's only so much compartmentalizing in the end.
She's a tireless campaigner because despite what you may hear, the homeless hotels and the immigrant hotels are not fancy schmancy places. They're not nice at all. And they're dens of criminality, just unsafe conditions. And Laura's been working a long time to try to pressure the Scottish government to have single-sex emergency housing for women and for women with young kids. She wants to have, like, you know, your politics smell bad. So good for you, Laura.
And part of that is about trying to get people to organize on the basis of sex as opposed to along ethnic lines, because the hotels are so politicized. And in Glasgow, we have a situation where it's the same accommodation is being used for homeless people as for asylum seekers. It's about half and half. And what we're trying to get people to do is to recognize that women have needs that aren't being met. Those needs need to be met. We need to fund proper, specific accommodation for them, regardless of where those women come from or why they're here. And the hope is that women will look at that and people will look at that and see the value in that and be able to put their racism or their party politics to one side to try to solve that as a practical issue that can be solved. So I'm like, please let it be possible that people's basic humanity can override some of their large, you know, broader political affiliations. Maybe not, but you live in hope.
If you're having any meetings with the Northern Scene, you better not have that flag in the background, Laura.
Well, no, it's funny because I get the crap from both sides, you know? I met with a Green Party politician last week and I could tell that she assumed that I was anti-asylum seeker because she knows I'm a TERF. So she's assuming I'm a horrible bigot and I must hate asylum seekers. And it's infuriating because you can never just have a talk about, you know, we've got women, they're stuck in these places. It's bad. We need to do something about it. That's as far as you need to go. I don't need to talk about ethnicity or geopolitics in order to get somebody to just accept that basic premise of, no, women shouldn't be stuck in buildings full of men. Well, of course they shouldn't. But yeah, another thing, Women's Declaration International, just a total, like, you know, chucking it in there and then I'll leave and let you deal with. They had nothing to say with the bombing of Afghanistan this week and the women and children that were killed. But, you know, I guess that's the story.
Well, maybe the bomb blew the burqa off, and they thought it was a freeing thing. It was a freedom bomb because it blew the burqa off.
Yeah, I guess that was a big picture. Good for women's liberation.
All right.
Well, thanks again for having me on anytime.
No, I appreciate you because Laura is a feminist. Yeah. And she's not like, oh, you're doing this whole critique of feminism, you bad lady, you ungrateful ball palmer. No, she might think it, but she's not going to say
After
it.
all
After all we've done through, you become a men rights activist. Men are bad and they shouldn't have rights. You bad lady. No, I have to add an asterisk all the time. Not all feminine. Okay. But anyway, thank you very much, Laura. I appreciate you. Anyway, everybody, thank you for tuning in. This has been the first episode of the new series, Is Feminism Cooked? We got into what happened at the FiLiA Conference because it really highlighted the irreconcilable differences between ZioFem PERF side and the tag side, or genocide, anti-genocide, or the side that acknowledges that a genocide's going on and the side that refuses to. It certainly got off the social media feeds and the newspaper articles and came to a head at FiLiA. And I think it's a teaching moment, especially for those who are dedicated to feminism and have a stake and an interest in what the next wave or the next iteration or whatever it is that comes out of this that's focused and centered on women's rights and empowerment and well-being. So we'll leave it at that. Like, follow, subscribe. Let me know what you think. And I will drop myself off now and head to bed. Take care, everyone.